Session resumed.
Mr. President, thank you very much. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen in the gallery, my fellow citizens, magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Great pleasure and honor to be here this afternoon to present before the floor our joint committee report of the Committee on Justice and Human Rights, jointly with the Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs, chaired by Senator Lacson. Mr. President, this is an offshoot of the resolutions or the filed by Senators De Lima and later on by Senator Trillanes on the matter of extrajudicial killings. And I quote, "A resolution directing the Senate Committee on Justice and Human Rights to investigate in aid of legislation the recent rampant extrajudicial killings and summary executions of suspected criminals, to strengthen the mechanisms of accountability of law enforcers, and to institute corrective legislative measures to ensure full respect for basic human rights, especially the right to life." That is the title of the resolution. That is the framework upon which the committee, later on, which succeeded Senator De Lima, embarked on its mission to investigate. Later on, another resolution will be filed after presenting a witness that had no affidavit, Mr. Bato, filed by Senator Trillanes. And it says, under 151, resolution urging the Senate Committee on Justice and Human Rights to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the alleged extrajudicial or summary killings purportedly committed by the Davao Death Squad, with the intention of coming up with remedial legislation to ensure the protection of the people's basic human rights and their rights to life and the observance of due process of law in the government's conduct of its campaign against terrorism, drugs, and street crimes. Acting on that, Mr. President, there were 6 hearings conducted by your committee. The first 3 hearings were conducted by and under the supervision of Chairman, at that time, the Honorable Senator Laila De Lima. After 3 hearings, a change was undertaken, and reluctantly I accepted the committee chairmanship of the Committee on Justice after Senator De Lima was removed in a reorganization of the committee. The only person I recommended in that committee, Mr. President, and it was a request upon those who were asking me to do so, and I said reluctantly I accepted, was to include Senator De Lima as a member of that committee. There was no other recommendation made by this representation at that time, and I just want to remind the body that that was my only move when I accepted it, my only request, so that the credibility of the Senate will not be stained by partisanship. Having said that, Mr. President, we embarked, as I said, on 6 hearings. And let me just say that in my executive summary, I said, kinakailangan mapuksa ng gobyerno ang patuloy na paglaganap ng patayan sa ating bansa sa kasalukuyan at sa mga nagdaang taon. Kailangan alam natin, mga Pilipino at pati na ng buong mundo, na tayo ay may pagpapahalaga sa buhay at dignidad ng sinumang tao at may mabilis na katarungan para sa lahat. Sa ganitong paraan, may babalik ng tao ang tiwala at kumpiyansa nito sa pulis at sa gobyerno. Quote unquote, Mr. President. Now, Mr. President, I do not have a prepared text. I was just told that I could sponsor it today, so pardon me if I deliver this extemporaneously, which has been the usual thing coming from the heart. And having had 6 hearings, after knowing what has happened, we will deliver that as I present it. Mr. President, we were called upon to investigate whether indeed there were rampant and, killings in the country. And indeed, we said yes. But we went the extra mile. Is there a state-sponsored killing? And if we're to look at that, we have to look for evidence to show that there was testimony to show either that President Duterte or General Bato or the Department of Local Government had given orders verbally to some people in the department or among the police forces or among any other group that they're ordering it as a matter of policy. Second, Mr. President, there was no presentation on the part of those who presented the witnesses. And I will say this. When we took over, Mr. President, we did not miss a beat. There was a scheduled hearing, and we continued on with the hearings. We did not postpone. That is a matter of record. We continued with Mr. Matabato. And for the record, Mr. President, Senator De Lima, when she started the hearings, called on some witnesses allegedly coming from the Commission on Human Rights, or coming from the Human Rights. And after 2 testimonies were given, immediately she went into calling a new witness, in spite of the fact that there were others in the Commission on Human Rights, supposedly witnesses. And when we studied the affidavit, they were all witnesses to killings, Mr. President. There was no proof, no scintillo evidence to show that there were orders made by any member of the government, especially those who make policy, that there was an order to commit extrajudicial killings as a matter of policy. And so we went on with that, Mr. President, and when this representation took over, like I said, we continued with the hearings and presented all the testimonies of people that were invited. In other words, these were the witnesses of Senator De Lima. Initially, they said these were not his witnesses, such as Mr. Batobato, and eventually it was proven, and she would admit later on, that she was presenting it. In fact, Mr. President, Mr. Batobato is no stranger to Senator De Lima, and vice versa. Mr. Batobato was a witness under the Witness Protection Program in 2014, when Secretary De Lima was still Secretary of Justice. And when he left, Secretary De Lima was still there. He left the Witness Protection Program, and as you know, being a former Secretary of Justice yourself, Mr. Senator Drilon, you know that the Witness Protection Program requires that the witness be released from being a Witness Protection Program by virtue of a signature showing acquiescence by the Secretary of Justice. Having said that, Mr. President, Senator De Lima was aware that there was a witness such as Mr. Matabato. Having said that, she was also CHR for 2 years, a little bit more than 2 years, and Secretary of Justice for 6 years, or almost 6 years, until she decided to run at the latter part of 2015 when she filed her certificate of candidacy. Having said that, Mr. President, let me just put it this way. We found that tens of thousands of people have been killed every year since 1999. And if we are going to cite extrajudicial killings, Mr. President, it is a known fact that the State Department of the United States of America has been sending us missives to the Department of Foreign Affairs about extrajudicial killings perpetrated in the country as early as 1999. In fact, if you look at the statistics, and that is why the title of this presentation is Killings with Impunity, A Time to Act. Ayan po ang nakalagay dyan, 2001, murders and homicides totaled 9,000, 2002, a total 10,000, 10,000 in 2003, 2004, 9,859, and so forth and so on. It spiraled to 2009 where they had 14,295 killings, 2010, 12,353 killings, 11,000 plus in 2011, in 2012, 11,500, 2013, 16,160 killings, and 2014, 13,105, 2015, 12,481, and as of November or October at the time, 2016, we had 8,499 or 4,409 killings, Mr. President, or a total of 177,000 killings over a period of almost 16 years. So killings, there are aplenty, Mr. President. Marami talagang pinapatay. Ang tanong, meron ba nangyayari? Sari-saring patayan ang ginagawa. Noong araw, panahon pa ni Mr. Marcos, ang sinasabi, meron tinatawag na salvaging. Napakarami po niyan. Wala rin tayo narinig na resulta ng investigasyon. Meron tinatawag lately, yung tinatawag nilang riding in tandem by motorcycles. Thousands have been killed by riding in tandem, but rarely do we hear any solution to any investigation, except very recently, and I applaud the police of Mindoro, they captured 2 policemen, one a lieutenant, and awarded one at that, who killed a crusader by the name of Luz in Mindoro, and they were captured by fellow policemen in the next town. And you can see the Manila Bulletin presentation there showing that motorcycle riding in tandem assailants killed the Citizens Crime Watch Regional Counsel, Ms. Zenaida Luz. The assailants were 2 policemen, Mr. President. And we investigated that. Mr. Lacson, Senator Lacson, and I both made presentations to that effect, and that was taken up in the hearing. So killings, there are plenty, no doubt. Killings solved, very sparse, Mr. President. And this is where we go to the crux of the matter. We have created laws here in this country which require, if it is a police-related killing, for an example, the creation of the IAS. But the IAS, through the years, have become IWAS. IWAS po na mag-solve ng crime ng police under amendment under Republic Act number 8551. At ito po ay hindi ginagawa ng IAS sapagkat tatagal ang kaso. Actually, it takes about 125 days. Siguro naman po, alam ni Senator De Leon, because nanonood siya doon sa hearing, nagtatanong siya, na nung pinatay yung Albuera Mayor, ando ng baril, ando ng extraordinary amount of force, 24 policemen, ando ng ebidensya, pinaluhod yung mga pulis at mga gwardya, ando yung ebidensya na pumasok, ang nagbarilan di umano, nakuha yung baril, nakuha yung mga bala, nakuha na 2, pinalabas muna nila yung preso, at tinepok, pinatay si Mayor Espinosa. No matter how bad one is, we are still a government of laws and not a government of men. Hindi po sinunod yun. Pinatay rin yung isa. At nakikita nyo, yan ang naging daan na naglakas ng loob na ang ating maraming mga kapulisan, hindi lang yung ilan, kaya nasabi pa natin po na bago yun, pinatay rin sa Alvarez, sa kulungan, pareho ng modus operandi, may search warrant yung umano na hindi naman kailangan, sapagkat yan ay hindi kailangan sa isang pitan ng gobyerno. Pinatay rin yung isang mayor doon sa pareho sa baybay 1 week before, pareho, pero hanggang ngayon ang iwas pa rin hanggang sa maunahan na ng National Bureau of Investigation. Kaya makikita natin ang problema ay yun. Madali po natin sabihin sa committee, o sige, ayan, payag na kami extrajudicial killing, payag nga ho kami, pero ang tawin ko sa inyo, papayag ba kami na sabihin natin wala namang katibayan, wala namang ebidensya na sinasabi na ito ay policy ng ating gobyerno? Bago po tayo magsalita niyan, tandaan po natin na pag sinabi ng Senado na may extrajudicial killing na sanction ng gobyerno, automatic, merong repercussion siya sa buong mundo. Masisira ang ating gobyerno. At pati na rin ang Senado, masisira sapagkat naglalabas tayo ng ebidensya rito ng isang conclusion na hindi covered ng ebidensya na nagpapatunay na ito ay talagang ginagawa ng gobyerno as a matter of policy o isang polisiya ng gobyerno. Wala po kami nakuha dyan sa tinatawag na ebidensya na kailangan natin. Ganun na rin po doon sa dangerous dogs law. At ito ay gusto ko sana pakinggan nyo maigi ang aking sasabihin. Paano po ba nag-umpisa ito? Bakit nung ma-appoint si Secretary De Lima, mahalal siya na Senator in charge of the Committee on Justice, ang una niyang i-final ay yung tinatawag na extrajudicial killings. Tanong po, hindi kaya po dahil siya ay talagang tinutugis ng administrasyon? That we cannot refuse. That we cannot deny. Naghahabulan sila ng ating Pangulo. At tila baga, maraming lumalabas sa kanya, pero maaaring ang nangyari at bakit natin siya tinanggal, hindi ko pa rin maintindihan. Alam ko kung ba't natin sila tinanggal, nag-aagawan ng mikropono, na wala ng control, nakikita na ang investigasyon ay patungo laban sa presidente. At syempre, hindi naman yun ang pakay ng komite kagad. Kailangan patunayan muna. Pero ano nangyari pagkatapos doon, ng Presidente Matabato? Tandaan po natin, walang affidavit in violation of the rules. Walang affidavit, investigasyon po yan, dapat may affidavit. nagitla na lang po ang committee na biglang merong bato-bato na who, I would say, admitted many things at could not prove many of his allegations. And having said that, nung nangyari yan, biglang pumasok ang isang resolusyon na biglang imbestigahin natin. Nung hindi mapatunayan na meron doon sa unang mga testigo, mukhang naglabas ngayon ng resolution na hinihingi naman ay nung panahon ni Duterte, meron raw dangerous, mayroong Davao Death Squad na tinatawag. At yung Davao Death Squad na yan ay dapat imbestigahin. Wala po kaming pinigil. Inimbestiga po natin yan. Dinala namin lahat yan at pati sila siguro nagulat dahil lahat dinala po natin. At ano po ang nangyari? Hindi lang napatunayan si Mr. Bato-Bato was not just inconsistent but he was lying. Sabi niya CHDF siya. Meron kami katibayan na sinasabi hindi siya CHDF ng colonel o in charge. Ayan po, nakalagay yan certification ng Benjamin Howe, General. General ba? General in charge dito sa tinatawag natin Army Chief of Public Affairs on Bato-Bato's CAFGU membership. Papatunay na hindi siya member yan. Yan ang unang sinabi. Sumunod, siya ay member ng tinatawag na CHDF. Napatunayan rin hindi siya member. Pagkatapos meron siyang sinasabi na yung mga police involved doon sa killing nung si King na nagkabali rin. Yung pala sa loob ng hotel pinatay, sa loob ng opisina pinatay, ay hindi sa labas ng McDonald's. At ang totoo niyan, sinabi pa niya doon sa isa na isang Medina ay involved doon sa raid na binomba nila yung Muslim mosque. At ang lumabas po doon ay hindi pa pala pulis si Medina. Pero inakasuhan niya na si Medina kasama sa pagbomba. Nakalagay ko yan lahat sa TSN. At pagkatapos, ano po sinabi niya? May mga sinabi siya na si Sally Macdum, yung kanyang bilas, common law, bilas, ay sabi niya, terorista samantalang lumalabas na nagninegosyo sila. Yung nga ang pinagkaguluhan namin, ang sinabi ko ay material concealment, dahil bagamat alam namin may NBI investigation na rin-recommend siya, ang hindi namin alam ay may hawak si Senator De Lima at yung iba na ang pangalan ng mga pulis na nakalagay doon, o hindi man lang pulis, ay hindi yung mga pulis na inimbita nila. Katulad nila Cañas, sinabi niya, malakas kay Duterte. 2 beses sinabi pinatay yung kanyang kapatid at yung kanyang kapatid nirecommend niya hindi tinanggap ni Duterte. Sa madaling sabi, walang lakas at wala naman talagang sinasabi na siya'y kasama sa patayan ni Bato-Bato o ganun rin sila Cañas na pumapatay sila. Madaling sabi po ay napakaraming pagkakataon na pinagbigyan natin si Bato-Bato na dapat itong Senado pag kami nagsisinungaling, dapat talaga mapalabas yan. At yan nga ho ang napalabas. Meron pa rin hong ibang mga ebidensya na pwede natin sabihin tungkol kay Bato-Bato na masasabi natin na mukhang hindi naganap ng gusto ang kanyang pagtitestify sapagkat huling-huli lahat ang kanyang ginagawa. So sa madaling sabi po, meron bang Davao Death Squad? Lahat po na sinabi niya, pati sinabi niya na siya ay bodyguard ni Paulo Duterte at ng pamilya, yun ay itinanggi naman. At wala na rin siyang sinabi na kontra doon. Sapagkat nung tatawagin na namin siya nung gabi, and let me just say that we had a record of 14 hours of marathon hearings, and then another marathon hearing followed, and then when we were about to call Mr. Bato-Bato to have it, they say, ano nangyari? Nawala po si Mr. Bato-Bato. Pinauwi. Siguro naman po simple courtesy. Simpleng courtesy lang sabihin, nung nagpauwi na si Senator Trillanes, si Chairman, Mr. Chairman, pwede ko naman pauwiin. Itong taong ito at delikado ang buhay niya, 8:30 in the evening, pinauwi niya. Dapat naman sana nagkortesiya na sabihin, yan. Yan ang nakalagay sa akin. Boss Senator Trillanes staff said that Bato-Bato had to leave. Yan po nakalagay sa HCS, dito ata, ano yan, HCS ba yan? At security won't be, so his security won't be compromised. I told his office we want to finish Davao Police tonight to start with CHR tomorrow, and they understand. Pero wala, umalis si Bato-Bato. Kaya nagkagulo ng konti doon, at yun na nga, nag-walk out, Pero tatandaan ko, sabi ni Senator Pacquiao, at binubulungan rin ako ni Senator Lacson na i-terminate na, suspindi na. Kapag nagsisinungaling itong mga ito, nilalaro lang tayo nitong mga ito. At nasa TSL rin po yan. Kay may Senator Pacquiao, pati kay Senator Soto. Pero sabi ko, na-overlook lang, oversight lang ni Senator De Lima. Napakahinaon po ni Senator De Lima nung panahon na yon. Pero nang biglang dumating si Senator Trillanes, medyo nag-iba ang timplada at medyo nataas na ang boses. At sabi, mag-walk out. Ang sabi ko, I am ready to continue. Ayaw niya mag-continue. Nag-walk out ho yan. Kaya sa tingin ko, pag nag-walk out ka, unang-una, ang pikon talo, matas mahalaga, yan ay misbehavior na dapat litisin natin kung kailangan. However, upon a message sent to us na gusto mag-apologize at gusto makipagkita, tinanggap ko po ang apology ni Senator Trillanes. Hindi ko po pinablicize. Pumasok sa aking opisina, doon lahat ng testigo, at nagkamaya kami, at hindi na raw niya gagawin yung ginawa niya yon. Ganon rin si Senator De Lima, about 4 or 5 days later, nagpunta rin sa opisina at nag-apologize. And being a gentleman, sabi ko, wala akong ipa-file na sa Ethics Committee. However, Mr. President, when you look at all these incidents, apart from the fact that there is no state-sponsored policy to commit killing. Now, let me just be clear here. Walang state-sponsored killings kaming nadiskubre. Maaring meron. And I repeat that. Maaring meron. Pero walang lumabas na testimony na sinasabing may state-sponsored killings. At, huwag mo ako tinuturo, may I put it on record that I'm being pointed at by Senator Trillanes. Maybe there's somebody behind me. And let me just continue with this. Whether or not the report killings beginning mid-1990s in Davao were allegedly perpetrated by a Davao Death Squad. Wala kami nakuha ganyan. And then, of course, we went to our other finding. Sapagkat tumuloy kami doon, at pagtuloy namin doon, ano po nangyari? Ang nangyari po doon ay tinawag namin ang mga kapulisan ng iba't ibang lugar. Mga chief of police ng 7 top 10 cities, Mr. President, and provinces. At nung mangyari yan, napatunayan na maraming killings, napatunayan rin at tinanong ko, hindi kaya lumalakas ang loob ng mga kriminal at naghahanda sila labanan kayo pagka kayo ay lumalapit sa kanila. Ang sabi, totoo po yan, pwede po mangyari yan. Meron ba mga pulis na pumapatay? Meron po. Dahil they are trying to create distance because maaaring mga alaga nila na tulak yung mga pulis na yan. At yan ay hindi naman kaila sa inyo sapagkat ako'y nagsalita dito nung sinabi ko sa pagbubunyag ng Presidente Duterte ng 5 general, sigurado maraming mamamatay dyan sapagkat talagang pipigilin nila lahat yung mga tulak nila at maaaring mamatay ang mga yan dahil ayaw nila na magkaroon ng testigo. Nakita natin ang nangyari sa Leyte, sunod-sunod na patayan yan. Bakit pinapatay? Anong motive? Maaaring may testigo. Narinig yung sinabi ko kay Kerwin mismo. Kasalanan mo ang pagkamatay ng tatay mo. Sabi mo hindi kasama pero ako naniniwala kasama siya. Dahil ako hindi papatayin niya kung walang nalalaman at walang ituturo. At lahat ng kasama mo pinapatay dahil maaaring maituro. 6 na ata ang mga sistema, ang mga kasama niya ang pinatay dahil palagi ko may ituturo. Sa madaling sabi, many killings with impunity to the years after the president have not been resolved by the police. That's our third finding. Leaving our people feeling unprotected, insecure, fearful and cynical about the ability of the police to protect and serve them. There is an urgent need to undertake reforms in law enforcement and strengthen the criminal justice system to fortify the rule of law. Ang sinasabi ko po rito, talaga may killings, pero dapat ayusin natin ang batas. Yan po ang pakay ng Committee in Aid of Legislation. Pero ano po nangyari? Napatunayan natin yung mga sinabi ng kapulisan, kaya meron tayong mga ginawa na mga katibayan, na mga recommendations upang sa ganoon, ito ay talagang mas supil natin ang pagpapatay. Ang masakit lang ng loob ko ay lumalabas na gusto ata ng karamihan ng mga kasama natin kung magkamisan ay lumabas natin na mayroong extrajudicial killing kahit na walang ebidensya. I'm sorry, ilan lang sa mga kasama dapat, pagka sila nagkamali, dapat mabilis. Hindi kailangan guilt beyond reasonable doubt for administrative hearings. Kailangan pwede silang tanggalin. Pwede silang isuspende upon summary hearing. Pero sa narinig namin noon sa mga investigasyon dito, mukhang pinatatagal at pinapahaba. It takes about 125 days. Ayan po, nakalagay. Bago tapos ang paglilitis ng isang kapulisan na sasakdal sa IAS o sa IAS. Kaya sabi natin ngayon, ang ating recommendation po ay ito. Hindi po ba dapat bigyan na lang natin sila ng 5 araw? Nakita na natin yung baril, nakikita natin yung mga testigo, i-file na kagad at under the law, pwedeng tanggalin ng PNP, Director General o ng Regional Commander ang mga pulis sa saliwa o pasaway na pumapatay na wala sa lugar administratively. It doesn't mean that na hindi sila papayla ng criminal case. Mas mahaba yun. Kaya administrative hearing, summary hearing, sa bagay dito ay patuloy sa prinsipyo na pagka ikaw ay naging traidor sa iyong sinampahan na proteksyonan at pagsilbihan ng tao, dapat bigyan ka ng mabilis na karampatan aksyon ng gobyerno. We will not be helpless, Mr. President. In fact, Mr. President, this representation when he is still a mayor, realized that the mayors no longer had absolute control or a lot of control over the police. I even talked to President Aquino at that time, and of course, I know the law, sabi sa Constitution, only one police force, control and supervision shall be in the National Police Force. Pero sabi ko, hindi naman dapat kawawa ang tao dahil lahat maraming ginagawa na katiwalian din ng ibang mga pulis. So ginawa po namin, ako po ay naglabi sa Congress at nalapaso po yung People's Law Enforcement Boards. Pero ano po nangyari? Sinakluban po yan. Wala nangyari. In fact, 88 cases lang in 1 year ang kanilang nilitis. Biro nyo naman nyo, lahat ng plebs meron sa bawat munisipyo or every third municipality or every province or every city. Pero wala nangyayari. Ibig sabihin, tila circle the wagons ang kapulisan natin o ang DILG pagka pulis ang involved. Ayaw nilang may embarrass mo ang presidente. Yun ang mali. The president will be enhanced pagka nakita ng tao na ang presidente hindi kinukonsente yung mga katiwalian ng pulis. At dapat pairali sa plebs, pairali sa Lapolcom, pairali sa PNP Director General na pwede matanggal ng pulis sa lalong madaling panahon after summary hearing. Hindi 125 days. Counter affidavit, at mapapatunayan, then mag-appeal sila kung gusto nila. In the meantime, the case should be filed. That is our first recommendation, Mr. President. Kailangan report within 5 days from time of the incident by the IAS. PNP may suspend the police, confiscate the gun, disarm the suspected police who fired the gun under investigation. It is already there, but it is not being implemented, Mr. President. At dapat, within 15 days, makapag-file ang kaso. Ano kaakibat ito? Kaakibat ito ay nakipag-usap po tayo kay Chief Justice Sereno at sabi ko siguro dapat gumawa tayo ng court sa Kongreso o kaya kayo mismo mag-designate, create and designate special criminal courts for erring and abusive police alongside illegal drugs. Para nakafocus ang tao sa mga west na hawak ng kapulisan, nakafocus ang tao sa mga west na hawak ng drugs. Pangatlong recommendation po, create joint congressional committee to monitor killings and paramilitary units, Mr. President. Hindi parliamentary po yan, paramilitary. Bakit po? Lahat ng ginagawang patayan dito ay nagiging statistic. Pero ngayon, yung Congressional Committee hearing, nakita ko si Congressman Umali rito kanina, Committee on Justice, dapat pagka may pinatay, every month, kinukuha yung statistic, pwede isubmit. Kailangan ibigay sa Congressional Oversight Committee on Police, Public Order, and Justice. Yung dalawang committee yan, para masasabi, tawagin mo, katulad ng pagtawag namin sa ilang mga kapulisan nung hearing na pinaparap namin sila at sinasabi namin, bakit ang daming patayan dyan? Bakit 200 ang pinatay sa iyong jurisdiction pero wala ka nahuhuli? Sa kabila ng 306 million ang budget ng kapulisan para sa intelligence fund. Ba't wala kayo nahuhuli doon sa tinatawag na vigilante killings? Bakit wala kayo nahuhuli doon sa mga pinapatay na nakakabaro ng patayan ng mga pulis? So that means, hindi na makakalusot yung pwede na o wala magagawa ang citizen. Isinama natin ang executive, ang kapulisan, ang judiciary sa paggawa ng tinatawag na husgado para sa kapulisan, at sinama natin ang Kongreso para magtulong at para malaman na ng tao na may gagawing aksyon ang lahat ng hanay ng gobyerno para dito sa mga kasong ito. Malinaw po, ang gusto natin ay sarahan ng pagkakataon na yung killings with impunity ay matigil. At finally, magkaroon tayo at mabigyan natin ng lunas yung daing ng tao na walang kalaban-laban ang tao pagka sila ay pinapatay ang kanilang kamag-anak o pinapatay ang kanilang mahal sa buhay. Pati po plebs, ito po ay nilakad po natin dito at hinihiling natin sa Undersecretary of Local Government Secretary na malagay sa budget nila na magkaroon finally ng budget yung plebs na 100 million for starters this year. Para talaga makakakilos yung plebs at meron na namang another layer na kung sino mauna, pwede lang isolve yung medyo abusadong pulis sa kanilang lugar. Again, apart from taking about the height of crime, this is important. Alam po ninyo, kailangan ang crime dapat kasama ang tao para mapuksa. Hindi kaya ng pulis yan. I would be unfair if I were to say the police are only the ones responsible. There's been apathy. Walang pakialam ang tao, patay ng patay, walang pakialam, hindi na nagagalit. Either natatakot, o akala nila walang magagawa, walang kalaban-laban, and that is why we came out with plebs, we came out with all these laws, pero hindi pinapahiraw. And therefore today, we will add another one. Yung sinasabing riding in tandem. Naku, katakot-takot po yan. Yung dalawang pulis na bumatay kay Miss Luz sa Mindoro. Riding in tandem po yan, nakabonet. Mabuti lang may nakakita at nahabol sila kaagad, kundi hindi nahuli yan, hindi nabaril yung isa doon. Pero ngayon po, para mapuksayan, ang sinasabi po natin, ito yung nabanggit ko na dati dito, nabawasan natin ang pagkakataon makatakbo, yung mga ganyang nakamotorsiklo. Lakihan po natin ang plate number na motorsiklo, ilagay natin sa likod at ilagay natin sa harap. Katulad po niyan, medyo liwanagan nyo ng konti, madilim yung litrato, makikita nyo malaki, hindi naman po pangit, at makikita nyo yung plate number kagad para pag may bumaril, makikita kagad. At kung walang plate number, pwedeng kumpiskahin kagad. Naka-file na po yung bill na yan. At pwedeng i-fine yung may-ari ng motorsiklo. At kung nawala at hindi niya na-report, pwede rin siyang i-fine. Sapagkat pag may ganyan, magdadalawang isip ang papatay na tao kung gagamit sila ng motorsiklo. Kung lilipat sila sa mga jeep o bus o naman, lakihan natin ang body number ng plate number sa side ng jeep, sa likod ng jeep, sa loob ng jeep, sa harap ng jeep, para hindi makaporma ang papatay at gagamit ng anuman transportation sa pagpatay ng maraming tao. Napakarami na pong taong pinapatay ang riding in tandem, kaya tumataas palagi ang pagpatay. Nakakalusot eh. Impunity. Harap-harapan. Biro nyo, araw na araw papatayin, magkabilang kanan hanggang ngayon. Makailan lang, may mga pinatay na naman. Ang ibig ko po sabihin, kung di tayo kikilos dito sa Kongreso, talagang ang mangyayari sa atin ay para tayong inutil at para tayong takot. Kaya kailangan rin, yung Land Transportation Office, kailangan lahat ng plate number nasa isang file ay nandiyan na yan, at kahit na sinong police, detective, NBI, or even the local citizen, kung sabihin ng emergency, provided he says his name and his number, tumawag niya sa LTO, malalaman kung sino may-ari kagad nung ginamit na motorsiklo sa pagsabi lang ng plate number, kung anong kotse ang ginamit para makailaban kaagad ang pulis. You narrow the opportunity upon which criminals can escape using motor vehicles. These are real proposals, Mr. President. Kailangan rin natin ng public information and education. Bakit po? Nakita po natin yung tokhang, hindi ko po sinasabing unconstitutional yun. Napagalaman ng committee, and I will credit Senator De Lima for that, na sinabi niya, walang abogado yung pinapaamin na sila ay drug pusher. Kailangan sasabihan ng tao, bago ka pumirma, meron kang kaparatang o magsalita o tumahimik. Sapagat bawat sabihin mo ay pwedeng gamitin sa iyo sa husgado. At kung wala kang abogado, bibigyan ka ng abogado ng gobyerno bago ka pumirma. Dapat ituro yan sa ating mga paaralan at dapat alam ng bawat mamamayan sapagkat Sa ibang bansa, tinuturo yung mga yan, kaya democracy becomes a real democracy. Napapalaban sila sapagkat alam ng gobyerno, alam ng tao kung ano kailangan gawin. People must be part of the process of change. Kailangan sama natin ang Parents Teachers Association. Kung sinasabi ng Presidente maraming apektadong drugs sa barangay, gamitin natin ang mga Parents Teachers Association para makatulong sa labanan sa krimen at para mapuksa rin ang drugs, Mr. President. Sa madaling sabi po, yung mga sinabi po natin ay talagang yan ang pakay natin dito. Yung pong tinatawag nating CHR investigations. Alam po natin lahat na meron tayong CHR sa konstitusyon. Nakalagay po sa konstitusyon natin na ang CHR ay pwedeng tumawag ng investigasyon, pwedeng mag-contempt, pwedeng mag-recommend ng prosecution. Nasa konstitusyon po yan. Kaya pag humarap po ang CHR dito sa committee natin, that is superfluity, sapagkat kaya nilang yan. Ang lumabas po sa CHR ay kalimitan ay yung mga pinatay nga po, at ito ay nakalagay nga, kung babasahin ko sa inyo ang sinasabi ng CHR, investigate sa Section 18 ng ating Constitution, Article 13, shall have the following powers and functions. Number 1, investigate. Yan po on its own or on complaint by any party all forms of human rights violations involving civil and political rights. On their own, therefore. Paano naman yung idadali sa committee natin? Si Senator De Lima ay naging Secretary of Justice, hawak niya ang NBI. Hawak niya si CHR for 8 years. Pinagsama mo. Abay, may hawak niya sa cabinet siya. She had the ear of the President. Bakit nakalusot si Bato-Bato? Bakit hindi finailan? Bakit nakalusot si President Duterte kung yun ang pakay niya? Hindi ko ginawa CHR siya. Pwede siya nag-imbestiga. In fact, meron pa isang investigador ng pulis na pinipilit niyang pihitin at bibigyan niya ng aumento na hindi na siya kakasuhan kung babaguhin niya yung kanyang testimony. Yun po, tama-tama ang pangalan. Ang pangalan po ng pulis ay ayaw. Ayaw pumayag. Pero ginawa yan 2009. Wala pa po tayo dito sa Senado. Sa madaling sabi po, the CHR, on its own motu proprio, or on complaint, by any party, all forms of human rights violations involving civil and political, adopt its operational guidelines and rules and procedures, and cite for contempt for violations thereof, in accordance with the rules of court. Hindi ko po tinitira ang CHR. Mahusay po yan. O tinawag po rin natin yan. Una, medyo gusto kong respetuhin nila ang Senado sapagkat yung isang kanilang tao doon ay medyo luwabas at naging lapastangan. Pero kami po ng chairman ng CHR, tiga University of the Philippines po yan, ginagala ko rin yan. Hindi kami nagkakaigihan sa lahat na sinasabi, pero we respect one another as gentlemen, which is what we should do as Filipinos. And even if we check the records, he said he respects the committee, he respects what we're trying to do. But we cannot squeeze blood from stone. Kung ano sasabihin ng CHR, dapat sinabi nila yan. Nobody was stopping them. Pinagsalita natin bandang huli si Chairman Gaston. At wala siya sinabi na pwede bang i-present namin. Kung sinabi niya kung may pipresent siya, sabihin ko kung may pipresent, sige, tuloy natin. Wala siya sinabi. Wala rin sinabi si Senator De Lima i-present yung mga testigo. Kamadaling sabi po, tinapos po namin yung hearing sapagkat ang framework kung saan kami inatasan na gawin ay naando na po. Ginawa namin yan. In fact, they can even grant immunity from prosecution to any person whose testimony or whose possession of documents or other evidence is necessary or convenient to determine the truth in any investigation conducted by it or under the authority. You have 11 powers and functions of the CHR, so much so that they can on their own, sarili nila, kaya nilang lumitis ng mga kaso involving extrajudicial killings. They don't need the frontline agency. Frontline. Di katulad ng Congress, it is only in aid of legislation. That is why, Mr. President, my brief to the media, my brief to everyone in this country, is to read the report. Andiyan ang recommendation. Nagagalit ang tao, imbestiga tayo na imbestiga. Wala tayong report. Kung po ay may report, lahat ng hinawakan ko sa Blue Ribbon noong araw, may report. May batas na pinafile. Ngayon po, may batas po tayo mga pinafile. Nakafile na po yung report ng committee. In fact, I can sponsor it right now if you like. Because that is the job under the Committee on Justice, we have already filed the necessary laws that we are recommending. At gagampanan pa yan. 1274, Senate Bill, Police Court Act of 2016. Senate Bill number 1275, strengthening the IAS Act of 2016 by Senator Gordon. Meron pa po yung iba, yung creation ng courts. At ayun na nga, yung creation ng courts. Meron pa po tayong ifa-file na iba pa. Sa madaling sabi, yan po ang ating nilagay sa abot dating kakayahan. Ngayon, kung hindi po gusto ng ibang kasama natin yan, we will respect their opinion. But please do not call your fellow committee members garbage. You stay within the fold. Pinaghirapan niya. 125 pages ang pinaghirapan. And I can prove. Ayan ang bill po. Ayan. Ayan ang mga bill. Tatlo yan. Meron bang darating pang iba? I'm sorry. Upulitin. So sa madaling sabi po, we did our job. It hurts me. And I'm sure it hurts other members of the committee. Na ginawa namin ang trabaho namin. Araw-gabi, nagtrabaho kami. Kung hindi natin ma-prove yung gusto natin, hindi tayo parang bata na maglulupis sa isang sulok at mag-iiyak. Spoiled brat ang tawag doon. So dapat, maging senador tayo true to his form. We call each other gentlemen. We ask, will the gentleman yield? And you can all talk to one another. You don't have to walk out. You can use parliamentary rules to say, Mr. Chairman, may I ask for a minute's recess so we can talk about it? Mr. Chairman, point of order. May we go back to the orders of the day? That was not used. It's either short-sightedness or the lack of, or the ignorance thereof, of knowledge of the rules in the Senate. How to operate in the Senate. Hindi dapat mag-walk out. Hindi dapat magmumura sa labas. Hindi dapat babaguhin yung resulta sa labas. At dapat dito magbago, mag-file tayo ng bill. Maglabas tayo ng bagong ebidensya. Ako po, I'm a team player. I will defend the Senate. Pagka tayo ay tama. I don't take it upon myself as the knight champion of the Senate. But for so long as I'm chairman of the committee, we will defend our work. It is no joke, Mr. President, na kami ay magpupuyat, pati staff ko, sumusuko na halos, para malaman lahat ang dapat alamin. Pero trabaho rin dapat nung nag-aakusa. Hindi kami nag-file ng bill. Ang nag-file ng request for investigation in aid of legislation ay si Senator De Lima at saka si Senator Trillanes. They have all the right to conduct the investigation. Ayoko na magdagdag pa, magkainisan pa. Hindi naman kailangan eh. Pero kaya ko pang dagdagan yan. Pero hindi ko nasasabihin. Pero sabihin ko po sa inyo, Mr. President, this is a sincere act on our part. And to prove to you how sincere we are, you have heard me call the President, do not fall on your own sword, Mr. President. I said that in open hearing. I said that the children are listening. You don't have to make a lot of noise, Mr. President. I've said that time and again, that the President must watch his language, that the President cannot be seen na nagsasalita na patayin ito, patayin niya. Sabagat, alam naman natin, ang Presidente natin, masyadong passionate. Kung sabi sasabihin, sa susunod na araw, babawin. Eh, ang sinasabi ko, hindi po pwedeng tatagal yung ganyang panutuntunan ng Pangulo ng ating bansa. Hidalal siya ng maraming tao. Pero hindi po pwedeng sabihin na lamang na kung ano sasabihin niya tapos babawin sapagkat delikado po yan. I will read in case some of us have not read it yet. And this is the only time I will read here. The dispositive portion, not because I do not like the President, or I like the President. And let me quote, epilogue of the summary, executive summary. A word of caution. Loose lips sink ships. Kung masyadong madaldal tayo nung panahon ng World War I, eh nasa submarine torpedo attack yung mga barko. Kung masyadong masalita ang Presidente, baka magamit pa sa kanya, laban sa kanya yung sinasabi niya balang araw, kung siya ay dadali sa International Criminal Court. I hope that will not happen because it embarrasses the whole country. And let me just say this, as a matter of advice, not only to the President but to all of us, and I quote Mahilig tayo mag-quote ng Biblia. Ako naman po, hindi naman religyoso. Pero yung nakikita kong magandang salita ng Panginoon, sasabihin ko dito. Quote, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight." Proverbs 3.56. Tinitingnan ko po ang ating pastor dito na nakaupo ngayon sa tribuna, na si Senator Villanueva, kung tama po ba yung sinabi ko. Mukhang hindi niya alam Absent ka ba ng tinuro ng
It's
talaga?
not point, Your Honor. It's chapter and verse.
Ayun.
Chapter 3 verses.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, thank you. Talagang magaling talaga itong pastor natin. Na-correct pa ako. A word of caution to the President is warranted. Isang salita sa ating Presidente kailangan natin gawin. While there is no doubt that he has the country's best interest at heart, when he wages war against illegal drugs and criminality, his ways and methodology may not be readily understood and acceptable to all. He thus should seek to epitomize a man of the law, siya ay abogado, and be an exemplary role model. All presidents must be role models in word and in deed. Ayan po, mababasa nyo, sundan nyo lang ako. In word and in deed. Leaders raise the values and performance of a people. Now, the president needs to be mindful of his role as head of state and be careful with his words. Avoid inappropriate statements lest they be construed as policies of the state. There may also be accusations of tolerance hurled against him because of the overwhelming support he gives to the police, manifested by his colorful language against drug pushers, may be perceived as a condemnation of the violations of human rights and due process that the police are committing in the guise of putting an end to the drug menace. While the people recognize his fearless naming of generals and prominent personalities, including politicians and judges, protectors of drug lords, due process must still be observed. The accused deserve their day in court to prove their innocence. While he has gained the admiration of many for his no-nonsense style, he will further national interest if he bears in mind that he must be not only a force for good, but perceived to be so. Children, listen to him. He both has a local and an international audience who scrutinize his every move. He will all the more maintain the trust of the people when he transforms into a leader worthy of emulation in every sense of the word. The President should likewise not just account for the misdeeds of the police, but raise their standards of accountability so they become paragons or protectors of the people. When the police violate the law, they must be punished. The doctrine of command responsibility obligates the President to take necessary and reasonable measures to prevent the commission of an illegal act or an irresponsible omission, and to punish the perpetrator. Uncorrected or unpunished, even when they have erred, the police may believe that they are above the law. When the police deem themselves to be omnipotent, they are emboldened and more killings ensue. The duty to protect the people is thrown out of the window. The offshoot will be silencing accused drug pushers and drug lords without affording them the Bill of Rights guaranteed them by the Constitution. In turn, the accused, fearful of their lives, arm themselves and fight back without resorting to the legal processes. The result is public disorder and the waning respect for the rule of law. Civilians must be dissuaded from taking the law into their own hands. They must be empowered to become part of the change without utterly disregarding the law. And I put this in bold letters. The war, ang giyera laban sa illegal drugs, kailangan may panalo sa loob ng sistemang legal. within the legal system. And the President must lead in reminding the people of this important message. After all, he has sworn as President of the Republic to faithfully and conscientiously fulfill his duties as President of the Philippines, preserve and defend its Constitution, execute its laws, do justice to every man, and consecrate himself to the service of the nation. Serving the nation entails doing justice to every man, even if he is a drug pusher or a drug lord. By all means, we must support the President for his resolute stand against illegal drugs, as well as our police force, who are at the forefront of the war against illegal drugs and criminality. The people will not follow a president who has lost the legal and moral high ground. We just have to do things right and within boundaries in a regime where the law is supreme and where there is justice for all. The time to act and end the impunity of killings is now. Thank you, Mr. President.